1692, Colonial, Massachusetts. Did you ever know this true story? The one buried beneath court records and school books, the one history softened because the truth was too uncomfortable to explain? Did you ever imagine that there was a time when childhood itself offered no protection, when the law did not see innocence, only obedience and punishment? Across centuries and civilizations, millions of children were not guided, corrected, or protected, but judged, sentenced, and punished exactly like adult criminals, their age irrelevant, their fear invisible, their suffering legal. Today, this is the story I will explain. The hidden history of children punished like criminals when age didn't matter. A story that forces us to confront how societies once believed that fear was a better teacher than mercy, and how law transformed children into examples, warnings, and property long before modern ideas of childhood existed. Because for most of history, being young did not mean being safe. And to understand how this cruelty became normal, we must return to a world where law cared less about age and more about control, where discipline was not about learning, but submission, and where childhood was not a protected stage of life, but a vulnerable condition easily exploited by authority. Beginning in ancient civilizations where the concept of childhood itself barely existed. Because in early Mesopotamia, around 2000 BCE, children were viewed primarily as future laborers and extensions of the household. And the law reflected this belief clearly, as legal codes like the Laws of Hammurabi made no meaningful distinction between adult and child responsibility when it came to obedience, allowing severe punishments for disobedience, theft, or defiance, regardless of age. And while these laws were written in stone and praised as civilization's triumph, they quietly embedded the idea that children could be punished as criminals if they disrupted order. A mindset reinforced by economic realities where families relied on every member's labor to survive, and discipline was enforced harshly to ensure productivity. Meaning that fear was considered a necessary tool, not an ethical problem. And this logic followed humanity as societies grew more complex, moving into ancient Greece, where childhood again offered little legal protection. Because while philosophers spoke about education and virtue, the law treated children as the property of their fathers, granting guardians nearly absolute authority, including the right to punish violently, sell, or abandon a child if they were deemed disobedient or unproductive. And in city-states like Sparta, this cruelty became institutionalized, where boys as young as 7 were removed from their families and subjected to brutal state-sanctioned discipline designed to break individuality and enforce obedience. And while Sparta is often remembered for strength and unity, its system depended on the idea that suffering at a young age was necessary to create loyal adults, blurring the line between training and punishment until children were no longer seen as individuals, but raw material for the state. A pattern that intensified in ancient Rome, where the legal concept of patria potestas granted fathers complete control over their children's lives, including the right to beat, imprison, sell, or even execute them without legal consequence. And under Roman law, children who committed offenses were not shielded by age, but subjected to punishments designed for adults, from public beatings to forced labor, because Roman society valued order and authority above compassion, and children were expected to learn fear early, a belief reinforced by schools that relied on corporal punishment as a standard educational method, where pain was considered essential to learning, and disobedience was met with swift physical correction, not reflection or understanding. And as the Roman Empire expanded, these values spread across Europe, embedding themselves into legal traditions that survived long after Rome's fall, shaping medieval attitudes toward childhood in ways that would haunt generations. Because in medieval Europe, children were not seen as innocent beings needing protection, but as morally flawed individuals requiring strict discipline, a belief rooted in religious interpretations that emphasized original sin, teaching that children were born sinful and must be corrected early to prevent eternal damnation. And this theological view justified extreme punishments, as church authorities and secular courts alike treated children as capable of crime, guilt, and punishment, leading to situations where children as young as 7 could be tried in courts, imprisoned, whipped, or executed for offenses ranging from theft to disobedience. And while such punishments shock modern sensibilities, they were considered just and necessary at the time, because fear was believed to instill virtue, and mercy was often viewed as weakness, particularly among the poor, whose children were subjected to the harshest treatment, as poverty itself was seen as a moral failing, making poor children more likely to be punished severely to serve as warnings to others. And this dynamic intensified in early modern Europe as legal systems became more formalized, ironically making punishment more systematic rather than more humane. As courts documented sentences with precision, recording the punishment of children alongside adults with chilling neutrality, describing young offenders in the same language used for hardened criminals, erasing their youth through legal terminology that reduced them to cases and examples. And nowhere was this more visible than in colonial societies, where European legal traditions were exported without restraint, creating environments where children were punished harshly to enforce social order in unfamiliar and often unstable territories. And in Puritan New England, strict religious laws governed daily life, criminalizing behaviors that today would be considered normal childhood mistakes, such as disobedience, lying, or defiance. And under these laws, children could be publicly whipped, fined, or imprisoned, not to rehabilitate them, but to demonstrate the consequences of sin, as public punishment served as both correction and spectacle, reinforcing communal discipline through fear. And records from the 17th century reveal children standing before courts accused of moral crimes, their youth acknowledged but dismissed as irrelevant, because the law prioritized obedience over development. And this belief that children must be broken early to prevent future rebellion persisted across cultures and centuries, shaping legal systems that treated childhood as a problem to be controlled rather than a phase to be nurtured. A mentality that crossed into the age of industrialization, where the rise of factories and urban poverty created new forms of punishment for children, as industrial societies relied heavily on child labor and enforced discipline through harsh legal measures, criminalizing truancy, vagrancy, and disobedience, allowing authorities to arrest and imprison children for being poor, homeless, or unemployed, effectively punishing them for conditions beyond their control. And institutions like workhouses and reform schools emerged, marketed as places of moral improvement, but functioning as punitive environments where children were subjected to rigid discipline, forced labor, and physical punishment designed to enforce conformity rather than address underlying social problems. And while these institutions claimed to protect society by correcting young offenders, they often inflicted trauma that followed children into adulthood, reinforcing cycles of poverty and marginalization. Because punishment without compassion rarely produces reform, a lesson societies repeatedly failed to learn. And even as legal systems began to evolve in the 19th and 20th centuries, introducing juvenile courts and age-based protections, remnants of the old mindset persisted, particularly for marginalized children, whose behavior continued to be criminalized more harshly than that of their wealthier peers, revealing that the legacy of treating children as criminals did not disappear, but adapted, hiding behind new language and institutions. And throughout this long history, the common thread was the belief that authority must be absolute and that fear was an effective teacher, a belief that ignored the psychological and emotional realities of childhood, reducing children to tools for maintaining order rather than individuals with unique needs and vulnerabilities. And what makes this history so unsettling is not only the severity of the punishments, but their normalcy. Because these practices were not hidden or controversial at the time, they were written into law, endorsed by religious leaders, and accepted by communities as necessary, meaning that generations grew up believing that suffering was an essential part of growing up, that pain produced virtue, and that obedience mattered more than well-being.
And this normalization allowed cruelty to persist without question. As neighbors watched children punished publicly without outrage, teachers inflicted pain in classrooms without scrutiny, and parents enforced discipline with the support of law rather than the guidance of empathy. And when resistance emerged, it was often dismissed as dangerous softness that threatened social order, reinforcing the idea that strict punishment was the only way to maintain stability. Yet history shows that these systems did not produce more moral societies, but rather environments of fear, resentment, and trauma that undermined trust and perpetuated inequality, because children raised under constant threat learned compliance, not understanding, silence, not responsibility. And as we examine this history, it becomes clear that the line between discipline and cruelty was repeatedly crossed not by accident, but by design, as laws were crafted to prioritize control over care, authority over compassion, and efficiency over humanity. And the most haunting realization is that many of these systems were created by societies that considered themselves advanced, moral, and civilized, believing that their treatment of children was justified by religion, tradition, or necessity, reminding us that progress is not automatic and that legal systems often reflect the fears and priorities of those in power rather than the needs of the vulnerable. And by understanding how children were punished like criminals in the past, we are forced to confront uncomfortable questions about how far we have truly come. Because while modern laws recognize childhood as a protected stage of life, echoes of these attitudes remain in systems that criminalize youth behavior, disproportionately punish marginalized children, and prioritize punishment over prevention, suggesting that the legacy of treating children as criminals has not fully disappeared, but rather transformed. And this history leaves us with the responsibility not only to remember the suffering endured by countless children whose age did not spare them from cruelty, but to question the assumptions that still shape how societies respond to youthful behavior today. Because the past shows us what happens when fear replaces empathy and law replaces humanity. And if we fail to learn from this history, we risk repeating it under different names, forgetting that the measure of a society is not how it controls its children, but how it protects them when they are most vulnerable.